lack of energy literacy at the United Nations. This is Ronald Stein. Let me put his profile here. Author, columnist, engineer, and he has a Pulitzer Prize nominated book, Clean Energy Exploitations. He's founder of Principal Technical Services, PTS, a company in the United States, a very big company at this time. Welcome to the podcast, Ronald Stein.
Armando, glad to be aboard.
Excellent. Let me put me in the big size here. Yeah. Tell me, Ronald, the United Nations defend Paris Agreement, net zero emissions. How do you see these commitments, worldwide commitments, especially the United States commitment?
Well, the net zero emissions can be devastating for the world, because the United Nations is oblivious to the fact that oil is not used for electricity. And their thought is that electricity, zero emission electricity from wind and solar, is going to solve the world's problems. But as we know, wind and solar don't make anything. You can't make tires and insulation. So the situation is they want to go to net zero, which is going to be devastating for the developing countries. The developed countries, like America, there's 40 developed countries out of the 193 members of the United Nations. About 40 of them classify into the developed category, the wealthier countries. And they got that way because of all the products that support transportation and the daily lifestyles we have, the hospitals, the airports. And the other 153 countries, they're still trying to be a developed country. And going to net zero and eliminating the use of oil before we have a replacement, the other 153 countries, they're not going to have reliable transportation and the myriad of products that we in the developed countries have. And so it's going to be tough. There's 80% of the global population of the 8 billion live in those less developed countries. 80%, that's more than 6 billion people. They don't have the myriad of products that we have. And going to net zero, they may never have them.
Yeah, that's right. Let me show that Jorge Oliveira, a friend from Lisbon, saying good night, good evening for us, Cavanha and Stein. He is saying that the worst in the UN is the Secretary General, and he called Guterres, Antonio Guterres. Thank you, George. Welcome. Yeah, that's a good point. George came to us. United States is part of the United Nations, or was created by United States. What's the history about this?
Well, it was. And like we have, President Joe Biden and California Governor Newsom, they're very vocal about net zero. And, United Nations is part of that. They're following that. But the United Nations won't have a discussion. Just like I can't have a discussion with Joe Biden. I can't have a discussion with Governor Newsom. I can't have a discussion with the United Nations. Let's talk about this, because the developed countries, the wealthy countries, we're living in la la land. In fact, the developed countries, if we go to net zero, is probably going to move us into the undeveloped category, because all the transportation we have with air and cars and ships, that's going to start going away, and all the myriad of products we have to support our hospitals and airports, they're going to become in short supply. So it's not just the less developed countries that may not join the Industrial Revolution. We're going backwards, because if they want to go to net zero, Armando, we had a net zero emission society in the 1800s. There was no oil,
but point, Ronald, that is the reason that wealthy countries are pushing to net zero for net zero. Is there a clear reason or a hidden reason? What exactly came on?
Well, I think it really goes back to the use of the word energy, because they refer to fossil fuel energy and wind and solar energy, but they're different, because wind and solar only generates electricity. Yes, it's clean. There's no emissions from wind turbines. There's no emissions from solar panels, but they only generate electricity. And that's the confusion, is the use of the word energy, because the United Nations, President Joe Biden, Governor Newsom in California, all believe wind and solar is going to replace fossil fuels. But it can't. They do different things. The zero emission society they want only generates electricity. And when you take a look at electricity came after oil. Let me repeat that, came after oil, because all the parts for computers, the wire, the insulation, everything in the office of the generating system of electricity, be it wind, solar, hydro, nuclear,
No, it's
coal,
right.
natural, it's all made from fossil fuels.
But Ronald, the point that I cannot understand is that a group of nations, wealthy nations, with scientists, with people that understand everything in the world, business, money, everything, do not attempt to this point. Do not understand. Do they understand this point, or is something intentional?
I think it's just a misunderstanding of the word energy. They think they're doing the right thing,
Yeah,
because we're going to have wind and solar energy is clean, and they believe it can do the job of fossil fuel energy. But fossil fuel is, especially crude oil, coal and natural gas is heavily used to make power. Coal-fired power plants, natural gas power plants. But oil is never used to make electricity. It's black tar, it's cruddy tar, unless you can, break it down through refineries and make derivatives that, through human ingenuity, we have thousands of products in our daily lives that didn't exist 200 years ago. And the developing countries, the 6 billion plus people, they don't have the products that we have. They don't have iPhones and iPads and washing machines and
sure.
air
And they
conditioners.
are more interested on food, health, reliable electricity, transportation, basic things.
Sanitation, yeah,
Sanitation.
exactly. And food, ironically, fossil fuels, all the things we get out of, natural gas for pesticides and fertilizers, it's allowed us to grow more food, and we could feed a lot more people. Well, those 6 billion people don't even have access to that. So you're right, they're scrounging for food just to survive.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And as far as I know, we do not have replacement substitutes for oil, and may take a long time to have full replacement for that.
Well, you're right. We've had 200 years to replace crude oil and been unable to do it, because everybody that comes up with a patent, coming up with an idea, within a couple of years, someone has cloned it or duplicated it. But for all the good stuff that we get out of crude oil, these derivatives that make all these products, we haven't found another way to make them. And so we have to, do our best to focus on improved efficiencies and conservation, because, nothing lasts for oil, nothing lasts forever. And we're extracting oil at alarming rates. And eventually the earth is going to run dry and we're not replacing it. So, when you take a look at the earth, it's been around 4 billion years, and humanity has been around a microsecond of that 4 billion years. And, looking
Yeah,
at
but
200 years from now, 500, we may have oil still coming out 200 years, 300, 400. I'm not sure it's going to go beyond 500 years.
coming back to the United Nations issues, the, 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 I don't know if you are aware about this, but do they decide based on votes and or are there some leaders that track these decisions?
Well, the leaders are people like Joe Biden, and they appoint certain people, and so if they're appointed by the people that want to go to net zero, they're going to all drink the same Kool-Aid, and so it's, it's
It's
endless.
funny. It's funny because I remember names like Al Gore, John Kerry, people in the same wave. I cannot believe that people with this level of intelligence, of cleverness, think this way.
I would I would hope they would think that we really should focus on how can we get to 6 billion people living in poverty around the world, improve their lives toward the lifestyles we have. And are we, exploiting the amount of energy we have? Probably. There's a lot of waste. People may need a vehicle, but you don't need a big vehicle. So we go to extremes, and the wealthier we are, the more extreme we get. A lot of these conventions are only attended by people who have private jets.
John John Kerry, I remember John Kerry private jet. He went to COP28 with his private jet,
Yeah.
and when the press asked him, "Your private jet?" No, no, it's of my wife. My wife is the owner. I do not have one private jet.
But why does she have one?
He said, but Ronald, tell me something that's important for me, for my understanding, and probably the people that are hearing us now. Pollution in one hand, because fossil fuels, we know that has pollution related to that, CO2 and other things, methane. And the other hand, instability of new energies like wind and that. So we do not have a solution.
We don't. And that's the thing we're trying to work on. And when people came up with the idea that, wind and solar can generate electricity and there's no emissions, that's zero emissions. But the problem is that wind and solar does something totally different than oil. And that's the thing that's missing from all the conversations is, in the wealthier countries, we have, airports and hospitals and communication systems, data centers, more and more millions of people working remote virtually because they have computers, have all these things that are made from fossil fuels. But the poor countries don't have that. And, climate's been changing for 4 billion years. Is climate going to continue changing? Yes, definitely yes. But how many people are going to be dying from temperature changes versus how many people are going to be dying if you keep them in poverty without the goodies we have? So I think there's no silver bullet answer. But I think you're going to keep more people alive and well if you can elevate them from their primitive living standards to, in the direction we're now living. And like I say, I think the amount of fatalities would be significantly less. But you really have to compare what's the two options you can get. If we eliminate fossil fuels like the United Nations wants us to, Armando, we could lose billions of people from starvation, malnutrition, diseases, weather-related fatalities. In the wealthier countries, we've eliminated about 99% of weather-related fatalities. Because if it's cold, you put on clothing or you warm your house. If it's hot, you put on the air conditioning. And so we can basically pretty much handle the weather and adjust to it. But that's something the United Nations that's where they're lacking in energy literacy. They can't answer the questions, primarily because they won't participate in the conversations.
And what the United Nations are saying about this specifically?
They are dictating like John Kerry did, like President Joe Biden does, and California Governor Newsom. We're going to net zero.
Defending that.
We're going to save the world. Saving the
Stop
world.
oil production and replace with something that we do not know what.
Well, replacing it with wind and solar. But that's not going to do it because wind and solar can't make anything.
No. See, 30% of oil go to petrochemical processes that 6,000 products, as you always say.
Right.
The other part is gasoline, diesel, jet kerosene. So it's irreplaceable at this time. Cannot be replaced.
Everything goes away. I mean, the space program. You know, when you take a look at the size of some of these vehicles, you know, when I fly, you know, you take a look at you board the plane, but you take a look at the plane, say, wow, you're going to get this off the ground. You know,
Yeah, it's so big.
And the same thing, if you take a cruise, you know, you take a step back and look at the size of that ship. Oh my God, you know?
Yeah.
And that's one of the luxuries we have because, you know, today there's like 50,000 merchant ships around the world. There's 20,000 commercial jets. They didn't exist 200 years ago. It was all sailboats. And it just took forever to go anywhere. So we are, like I said, that's the energy literacy that is missing within the United Nations and with a lot of the wealthy countries' leadership is there's a lack of conversation. We should be focusing on how to improve the lives of those 80% of the world that's, you know, living in poverty. We should improve their lives. Because by not improving their lives, you know, we're basically going to think the world's going to change by, you know, a degree or two. You know, I'm here in California. I'm not sure about where you're at, but I can see a 30-degree temperature change every day between morning and afternoon.
Yeah, we do not have it's a huge change every day, 30.
And if it changed, you know, 30.2 degrees, it's not going to affect me.
Yeah. I'm not sure that I'm right, but in the past I heard that the U.S., the intention of U.S. sometimes is to leave, to abandon the United Nations. Is it correct?
I think there's a lot of countries thinking about abandoning the UN because of those policies. And I think the French government had a change in leadership because of the Green government got kicked out. And, you know, I'm not sure how the U.S. election is going to go, but, you know, Joe Biden is much more green than Trump. And that might be one of the reasons, if the election goes that way, if Trump does win, that might be part of the cause that people are fed up with this green movement because it's driving up the cost of electricity, cost of the fuel, inflation's out of control. It's really affecting the wealthy countries, not only in preventing the developing countries from joining the same society we have.
So you see, with the possibility to change from Democrats to Republicans on November of this year, this participation and trends and can move, can be changed. I mean, from net zero to a more
yeah, I don't know if it's Republicans versus Democrats, right versus left. Forget politics. I just want to have conversations. I mean, I'd like to talk to Joe Biden. I'm 100% in favor of getting rid of oil. If there's a replacement, what's the backup plan?
Sure.
Because I want to continue living the lifestyle I have and have these conversations with Armando But if I can't get my new iPad, I may not have that conversation. So I don't care what the party is. I mean, that's just talk about logic. And like the difference is the fact that, whoever's in power has a lot of power, and everybody follows them. And when Joe Biden says we're going to net zero, a lot of agencies follow right in line. So, and if you have a different leader and says, well, we're not going net zero, then they'll start following them. But yeah, there's just a lot of people that just do not want to participate in conversations because it's going to be devastating, not only for the poor developing countries that want to live like us, it's affecting our lifestyle. Like I say, inflation is out of control. And I think it's right now, because all the net zero efforts requires a lot of the exotic minerals and metals.
Yeah.
That brings up the other issue. Is it ethical and moral to exploit those people?
It's a very important point. But before we go to this point, let me show that Professor Hernani Chaves from Brazil sending good afternoon to you and to me. Thank you, Hernani Chaves. Welcome. But this point is great because the UN is not taking consideration mining, water used to the metals, 100 times more mining that we have today, lithium, cobalt. They are not taking care about this. Why? There must be a reason for that. I cannot understand. Sorry, insisting with you, but
they're so focused, and I see it here in the United States. They're so focused on like EVs. They don't pollute like the gasoline vehicle does. So everybody's, we're going EVs, and there's, and I've mentioned this before. I won't buy an EV for ethical and moral reasons. Because I know where the lithium and the cobalt and all the minerals are coming from, and I'm not willing to financially support that. As we talked about, that's why I wrote the book, Clean Energy Exploitations, because it brings transparency.
Yeah, let me put in a big size here. So the layout. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, that's why it brings transparency to the fact that all the exotic minerals and metals are coming from developing countries. They have no environmental controls, no labor controls. And we're exploiting people who have yellow, brown, and black skin. And the environmental degradation is atrocious on their land, so we can go green. And I think it's unethical, it's immoral, and I think it's hypocritical because the government is so focused on this net zero concept, they're providing subsidies to encourage people to buy EVs, to build wind turbines, to build solar panels. And basically, I look at it the other way. I say, my God, they're basically telling China and Africa, continue exploiting your people that have yellow, brown, and black skin. Continue the environmental degradation of your land. We're going green in the wealthy countries. And I think that is unethical, immoral, and hypocritical. There's no justification for it.
And considering the wealthy countries you mentioned, the most, let's say, enthusiasts to green energy are United States and Germany, the two most.
Well, the wealthy countries, you're talking about United States, Germany, Australia, the UK.
Japan.
Japan. So when you look at the really wealthy countries that are driving this net zero concept, they represent, less than 1 billion of the 8 billion on this earth.
Yeah.
And, like I said, we can afford it. But, the people who are living on less than $10 a day, they can't subsidize themselves out of a paper bag.
But they buy the products that the third world manufacture.
They would like to buy them, but they don't have anything to buy with. And that's why they're live in such dire conditions.
Yes, it's an equation that I cannot fit well. Wealthy countries pushing for net zero, and they understand that it's impossible to replace oil at this time, and so I cannot understand the United Nations forcing to net zero too, but with the United Nations with countries that are poor countries too. So the discussion could be generalistic for this. So I cannot understand this logic.
Well, there's, as mentioned, there's no silver bullet answers because, you know, oil is not 100% the solution. EVs, wind and solar is not 100% of the solution, but there are situations where instead of dictating a solution, it could be, you know, part of all of the above. You know, electric vehicles, I think, are prime for some industries that, you know, work 8 hours a day. I mean, United Parcel Service and a lot of delivery service, their trucks work 8 hours a day and then they go back home, you know, they get charged. But I'm not sure that's dictating that for everybody's use. There's a lot of, you know, intermittent needs that, you know, yeah, they can do that. Or if you live in a nice sunny area like here in Southern California, you know, it might be an option to take advantage of the sun and use that electricity to reduce your bills. But to demand that people in Montana and North Dakota
Mhm.
have it, I mean, they don't have the same weather conditions we have. So it's, you know, demanding it, that the net zero policies are basically mandating all these changes. And, you know, it should be, you know, driven by society and their needs.
Going to our conclusions today, Ronald, please. So, do you believe with your speech? I'm trying to understand your conclusion, but you can confirm, of course, that you believe on energy addition with these new energies for electricity, and you believe that in the energy diversity. So we use all energies, not one energy on one side or other energy, but all energies at the same time. Is it
Right.
correct?
You want to use what's cost effective, because industry is going to invest in something that's investable. And, you know, to have the government finance this, you know, people are building wind and solar because they're getting money from the government, but it's not solving the world's problems. The most important thing is the lost reality within the United Nations policies that the primary usage of crude oil is not for the generation of electricity,
Yeah.
but the manufacture of derivatives and fuels, which are ingredients of everything needed in economies and lifestyles that exist and prosper. All the products that did not exist before the 1800s.
And there is no replacement at this time.
At this time, no. I mean, I would love to have an iPhone or an iPad
Made
made
by
of something.
trees.
Yeah. You know, there are repercussions. You know, we talk about the effect on society of losing these oil products, but one of the good things about it is you would eliminate all the wars because all the military equipment is made with fossil fuels. All the military jets, missiles, it's all fossil fuel driven.
Yeah,
So
hospitals, everything, products,
that,
as you said.
I mean, that, you know, the war in Israel, the war in, you know, Russia and the UK, solve it instantaneously, get rid of oil. You know, and so there are good things about it, but it's yeah, it is truly frustrating. Like I say, there's energy questions that should be considered by the policies and discussed, because what are the repercussions? You know, you're demanding and forcing society to live the way you think they should live. You know, we talked about Greta Thunberg. You know, she basically says, "How dare you?" But when you really, you know, turn the camera around, it's really, "How dare me to continue demanding all these products
Yeah, and she
so I could
used
live,
an iPhone.
so I could live the lifestyle I'm living."
Yeah,
You know, if you want to get rid of oil, stop using the products. There's no reason to manufacture crude oil into these derivatives, because if people don't want to buy the products, they'll stop making the oil derivatives.
Yeah, that's
So, it really, turn the camera on, and it's really us that's
make a
causing-
selfie.
Exactly, because you talk about people who have their private jets. Well, I mean, it was made with something. So
And it's not from electricity. Yeah.
it's hypocritical to say we're going to get rid of oil, but I'm going to fly my private jet.
So my conclusion is that we need to send this video to Antonio Guterres.
Right now.
Thank you so much. It was a great
Thank you,
pleasure
Armando.
for me again. Thank
Okay.
you.
Have a
Have
great day.
day. Bye bye.